But I did want to thank you again for sitting down and talking with us at the newspaper. I know I had covered this story pretty extensively from the start, and the community is very invested in your search and rescue. We were all so excited when you were found, so relieved. And as you know, there was a lot of global and national interest, so it was difficult to connect after the fact. So sitting down a year later, it's nice to hear from you and just answer some questions that people may still have or may be confused about. And I think, again, it's from a place of care because the community has been so invested. So thank you for taking this time in light of the recent 1-year anniversary of your discovery. Pretty amazing stuff. What was it like? How are you doing now? And what was your 1-year anniversary like? How did you spend it?
The 1-year anniversary was really rough. So it's, I think I talked to you right before then. And that day, I think it was a Friday or something. No, I talked to you after it. But the anniversary itself was really rough, like very emotional, with, I would call that a traumatic event, something similar to like PTSD. And so it re-triggered a lot of stuff. And it was just a process I had to go through, but I made it through and I'm stronger now. And, it's all about, gaining better perception of what happened and trying to find like the positive in it and moving through it instead of letting it get me down. So, yeah, it's all
Your
good.
family was with you during that time? And
yeah, so we kind of all went, we were together, which was really nice. And we all had some kind of healing to do around that. So
good. And when did you move from Maui, and what sparked that? And where are you now? I think some of us know, but
yeah. So I moved in November, and so what sparked it is that since I came out of the woods, I was in complete shock, and I knew I had to heal this. Like I knew I couldn't live with this, just ignoring it for the rest of my life. So so yeah, I spent most of my time healing myself. So I got back to work a little bit. I was seeing some patients, like very minimal patients, a few days a week for a while. And then something just like came over me around October and said, like, I have to go to India to heal. For whatever reason, it was a lot of prompting from good friends and teachers of mine that said, like that could just accelerate your healing process and kind of let you move ahead with your life. So I was like, yes, sign me up for that. So I was trying to maintain my place in Maui and go to India, and it just like everything fell through in Maui. So when when it's time to leave the island. So I knew that it was not the last time I'd be there, but for now I knew it was best that I just move on and like focus on my healing and sharing my story, and by writing this book. And so that's what prompted me to move off of island. And then since then I've been in India, and then I've been back on the East Coast with my family and friends, kind of going between Maryland, North Carolina. So for now I'm here in North Carolina.
I can't imagine the extent of your healing emotionally and physically. How are your physical injuries? What was that like? If you could recap some of your physical injuries. A lot of us saw the photos are pretty harrowing, but sunburn, lost weight, your shins, you had sounded like a fracture, even possibly a torn meniscus. What was all of that like with your physical healing?
Not fun. And it was, so I had a fractured tibial plateau on my left knee, which is pretty significant because that's where the ACL and the PCL attach. So that had me on crutches for 8 weeks, and then I was hobbling around for a good while, and still it's healing. So a year later, it's still healing. It's not quite back to normal. So I'm not able to do all the things I used to be able to do, like run and heavy hiking and things like that. And my shins are healed up pretty well, which is great because the infection was so bad I could have lost my legs, is what the doctors said when they came in to look at them in the hospital. And they put me on so many rounds of antibiotics, so that helped. Everything else healed very quickly, like the sunburn and, my lips were all torn up, my nose was all torn up, all that stuff like healed quickly, which was great. It was just the other little residual stuff. But overall, I'm grateful to have my legs and a healthy body. And even then, when I was out there, I was like, okay, well, I have a broken knee, or something's wrong with my knee. I can't use it, but the rest of my body's functional. So like, let me use that to keep moving.
Was
So
that knee injury from when you fell, or how did you sustain that injury?
yeah, so I was trying, it was day 4. I was lowering myself down into a waterfall. And I had done this, not a waterfall, excuse me, a stream bed. And so the waterfall was obviously nearby, but it was like a tiny little, like rolling, kind of waterfall. And so I was lowering myself backwards. I'd done this 15 or 20 times out there already over those 4 days. And typically the slope, it kind of goes steady down, like slope into the stream bed. So that's what I was expecting. And where I entered to have that happen, and I was going backwards, holding onto the ferns, right? The ground underneath of me, I couldn't see because it was getting dark. And so I just kind of like put my foot down there to search around for ground, and there was nothing there. And then right then I was holding on to ferns, and I realized that like 70% of them in my hands were dead. So they dropped me. So they ripped out and dropped me. A whole bunch of stuff flew in the air as far as like plants. And I fell 20 feet onto a straight left leg. So my left foot hit a rock and it just jammed up my whole left leg, left side. And then it immediately, and my right leg landed just in the water. And then it immediately ballooned out, which I know as a PT is not good, right? So just watching sports injuries and that kind of thing. So I dragged myself out of the little small pool and over to the rocks, and then spent the next 2 days pretty much in that spot, not moving, just trying to gain some function.
What were the shin injuries from? I can't imagine. They looked like burns. People have not been lost for 17 days in Makawa First Reserve, so I'm sure it's confusing, but what was that from?
So the first 4 days when I was trying to find my way, by the end of day 1, I knew I was lost, and I was like doing everything I could to get back to my car. And the ferns that I was going through, at the bottom, they're like kind of dead. And so all the leaves fall off, and then they have these little thorns, right? So basically, I was hiking through thorny ferns for 4 days, probably about close to 40 miles, I would guess, just based on the length of time that I was moving, because I was on the move from sunrise to sunset. So for those like first 4 days, pretty much.
So the physical injuries are one thing, emotionally a whole another thing. What was it like to be rescued and then all of a sudden thrust into the limelight?
It was rough. Yeah, I was like in complete shock, right? Just coming out of that experience, but so grateful and so glad to be alive, and like, full of those positive emotions. And I was like just in complete shock. So it's kind of like I was a deer in headlights for a little while, as I was like thrust in front of cameras immediately, like at the rescue, when the guys were all so excited and hobbies taking pictures and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it took me pretty much I think the week afterwards was like a lot of limelight, right? And then after that, I was like, no, I'm not doing this. It was just my nervous system reached a peak where I was like losing my head, right? Because I was in so much, it was just so heightened, like the sympathetic nervous system response was kicked up to the max extent. And so I kind of just started hiding from that moment on. I was like, I'm not doing this social media stuff. I'm not doing interviews. I'm not like, all these things were coming in like, oh, books and movies and all this. And, I understand the hype, and I understand that that's a positive opportunity, and it was a little inhumane. It was like, guys, I'm a healer by nature. So I would take, if something like that happened to my patients, per se, I would take them under my wing and protect them and be like, no, just like back up, like give her some space, let her breathe. So that's what I did. That's what I had to do for myself, and it was, I know a lot of people wanted to know what was going on with me, right? Because it was like blown out of the water with publicity when I was gone and then when I came back. And I mean, I didn't know that, I didn't ask for that. But there was like a particular response that was expected from me, and in reality, it's like, no, I'm just human and I just survived something. I almost died like multiple times. I need a little time to breathe. So I just took that and I didn't care what kind of stories were going to be formed, because I was like, people are going to think what they want anyway. And it's just, yeah, this is more important right now, than just like constantly being in the light. So
Yeah, I think New York Times had access even that night you were in the hospital. That was pretty shocking to have that, type of interview be done just because you were swept away and then all of a sudden in the hospital. And that was something too, that there are questions of whether there was any positioning, or this trip, this excursion being lost was intentional to position for celebrity or a book deal or movie deal. How do you respond to that?
yeah, so I was thinking about that earlier. And so Brianna, who she wrote the interview for New York Times, when she called me, so I had no idea. I was in my hospital room. It was like almost midnight, and my mom's like brushing the crap out of my hair, right? Because I had like full forest in my hair. It took her 7 hours to brush it out, so I didn't have to cut it all out. And my friend Bree, who was, we had like close ties for probably like the last year or something like that. She kept trying to call me. She was like calling my mom because Bree was out there searching for me. So my mom was like, oh yeah, she really wants to talk to you. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, I mean, she's a good friend, And then she called me. So she got through to me in the hospital room and called me and was just, I honestly, to be honest with you, I had no idea she was doing an interview. I didn't know until the next day when it was published. And like, I think my dad came in and said, oh, have you seen this? I was like, okay. I love her. And I was like a little blindsided because that is like not, I mean, I thought she was like, oh, well, I'm gathering some information. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then I think it was like, I don't know, it was just a culmination of me being completely out of sorts. And I don't know, it was like she was asking me questions and I answered them and I didn't think anything of it. Like I didn't think that there was going to be an immediate New York Times article published because of it. I don't know why. I'm not like a celebrity. I don't think about these things. I'm like, oh, my friend Bree's asking me questions. So that's how I took it. And that's what became of it. But I think that's fair, to say as far as like skepticism and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's where talking with you directly, it was such a different experience in hearing how down to earth you were, because there were a lot of questions whether the celebrity or this trip was intentional to gain that kind of recognition or celebrity status. So I don't know if, you've heard those types of questions, but for people to connect those things, I'm not sure how you respond to that.
I mean, my response would be that I don't live my life that way at all. Like still to this day, I have almost like very little presence on social media, and the things I post are to like help people to see life a little bit differently, right? So and prior to this incident, I was living in my house in Haiku, totally hiding out. Like I didn't market myself on Island. I didn't even know I knew that many people that showed up to look for me. But Maui's small and it's that cobweb matrix kind of thing. And so I think I just laugh at it because, I mean, I understand how that could be misconstrued, and, and there's just no truth there, um, within me, right? So within me, it's like, no, I've never lived my life that way. I've always like been super low key, grounded. I've never like wanted to put my face out there. So it was it was interesting, this whole wilderness experience just like blew my spot up, and then all of a sudden my face is everywhere. Like it's on People magazine and it's on news channels and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I didn't ask for that, and I can't help it, but yeah.
Speaking of Maui being small, and there are a lot of people probably spending maybe possibly too much time online, what were some of the harder parts of the accusations or the questions or the criticism? What were those questions like, and how did you feel?
Um, it was really hurtful. Um, if you're coming from the place that this whole thing was a hoax, then okay. But the truth and the reality is that I got lost for 17 days in the woods. I faced death like multiple times. I got rescued by a miracle that the helicopter found me. And that like the helicopters were covered by GoFundMe, which was amazing because I was like, I don't have that money, and I didn't care. I mean, I was going to obviously go into debt. I figured Benjamin was handling it. I didn't even know my family was there. Like, what? It's just, like me standing at the top of that waterfall when they found me. I was like, oh, is my family here? Oh, and Javi's going off, like, oh my God, are you even kidding? Like the news outlets are covering this, and Maui News is covering this, and thousands of people are on the ground searching for you, and all these people are praying for you. And like, I had no idea. I figured like a couple of my friends were probably searching in the woods, and that I knew that they were sending helicopters out because I saw them, right, many times. The helicopter didn't see me, but I saw them. And so it's like my head was spinning, right? And then I'm in the hospital, and I have a fractured knee and leg wounds, and they're like, I don't know if you're going to keep your legs. And then, that turns into like a few days later, I'm at a press conference with these bright lights and 20 microphones. And then like right after that, there was like bad publicity, right? Because I was in a state of, I don't know what's happening in the outside world. I only know what I experienced. What I experienced is like, by an act of like something miraculous, I was rescued, right? And you better believe that, I was like 4 days in, you better believe I was praying to anything I could think of, of higher power that could help me, because I did not want to be there. So it was like really rough. To circle back around, it was really rough living through that, being traumatized, and then like finding myself on a high as I came out of it, which I know a lot of people can't relate to maybe, but I had to. That was like what got me through. It's like, no, I have to stay positive. Like I can't just, sit and cry myself into a puddle and then expect to find my way out. Like I have to stay focused and positive, and I have to listen for the helicopters. I have to be intent, So it was just, it just totally blew my mind. And it was kind of sad, that people were trying to rip me apart and slander me. And there was even, some people like creating Instagram accounts, like fake Instagram accounts, and like writing things on my pictures about fake and scam and whatever. And to that, I just say that's really sad, for those people, that's how they want to spend their time. Yeah.
The day you went missing, I know we've talked about it a bunch in different interviews. Your mom had mentioned, I think in the interview the day later, that the day after you were discovered, that you had fallen asleep. Can you take us through that first day again and just clarify? I'm sure again, you didn't have a day planner out there and chart every piece of this, but what was that first day like?
So just to correct, I did not fall asleep, but I'll explain that. So generally speaking, I went for a hike that morning, I was planning on going to the Makawao Forest. So I drove up there, and as I'm driving up there, stopped by the post office, drop off a package for my mom for Mother's Day. I stopped at Haiku Mart to get some things to put in the package. And then went up, and I'm just, it's like gorgeous that day. It was like pretty warm, clear skies. And then when I got up there, there's, multiple different parking lots. And so I just felt called to pull into this one parking lot. I was like, cool, and I could see that there was a gate there and there was a trail on the other side of the gate, which I assumed was more like for mountain biking and that kind of thing. I was like, sweet. Okay, I'm just gonna like try this different trail. I had never been on that trail. I had been on the main trail from the big parking lot before. And so I just went, so when I was in the car, I was like looking over my backpack, and I had water and snacks and sunscreen and like a shirt to keep me warm, one of those like dry wick shirts. What else? And like a journal or something. And so I looked at my backpack and I was like, because I was trying to get in shape for like hiking Haleakala. I was like, okay, let me trail run, right? I haven't trail run since like grad school. And I figured it was like pretty level. And I was out of shape, so in my opinion. And so I left my bag. I was like, oh, I don't want to carry that. It's just extra weight and it's going to like bounce around. So I left it. I hid my key behind the back tire, and then I headed out past the gate. And then when I was walking, it was like so interesting. Within the first 20 feet past that gate, my legs felt like lead. It was the craziest feeling. It was like walking through quicksand. I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I just thought to myself, because I was trying to run, and I said, okay, if it's going to be this hard to run, maybe I should just walk and bring my backpack. And I was like, I don't need it. Like I could do like a couple hours and like come back and get water. No big deal. And so I just left everything, I left my phone. I was like, no, I know the trails. That's what I would do on my days off. I would like disconnect, like unreachable by cell phone from like friends and all that kind of stuff, just for the day, just for like a few hours of the day, so that I can like just be in nature, right? And so then I was walking up, and there are all these trails at the top of the like where I walked up, which I would call like the forest floor. It was like pretty level, because getting there was like up and over multiple huge eucalyptus that went down. And then I got to the top where the forest floor is. And as I got to the top, I was like, wow, there's all these like crosshatch patterns across the forest floor. And I was like, okay, well, and I was kind of like scanning it. So I just kind of started walking down the path. Like the path to me seems like the main path, right? And then made my way over to a tree that was like down, and the sun was shining right on it. I was like, okay. So I laid on the tree, I closed my eyes, and I meditated. I never fell asleep, right? So meditating means you just kind of like close your eyes and you get quiet, right? Generally speaking. And you're just kind of like tuning in. I was tuning into the sounds and like,
So there
whatever
was
was
no
happening.
falling asleep on the first day on a log.
No.
Got
So
it.
I never fell asleep. So I was there for like 20 minutes on that log. And then I got up and I went back the way that I came, because I was like, I should go back. And when I went back the way that I came, that I thought that was the right way, I got to the end and it was like looking into a gulch. I was like, okay. So then I started back, went to the tree, and then so on. So I kept trying different paths that seemed like the main path for the next few hours until I started to panic, right? And then I was like, oh God, this is not happening. How can I not find it, right? So I was even trying, okay, well, like, I think it's that, I'm pretty sure the direction of my car is that way, like using my internal guidance, my compass. And so I was trying that. So again, like for a few hours, I think I tried that. And then I was like, okay, I need to like pray. I need some help outside of myself. So I prayed, And I just asked, like, please direct me back to my car. Like, I need to go home. This is not cool anymore. And so it's like, oh, that way. Okay, great. Let's go that way. And so I went that way, and I was like, I don't know if this is the same way I came, right? Things look different. And I just got the confirmation, like, no, this is the right way. And I was like, okay, well, even if this isn't the exact way I came, I know, like, this is my mind. I know the forest isn't that big. So so I'll just go in a roundabout way, like back to my car. And that's pretty much what led me through day one, right? Was that idea of like, okay, well, which way should I go? My internal compass. And then that I in my mind, I was like drawing this logistical map of creating a square. And then the fourth arm to that square was what led me into like the raw jungle, right? At that point, I had been hiking almost 8 hours. And so I knew that I was lost, but I kept thinking that I was getting closer. So
About how
yeah.
many hours in did you realize you were lost, would you estimate?
Well, I mean, I realized that I was lost, yeah, within the first two, right? Um, I'd say like right before I prayed, because up till that point I didn't want to accept it, and I didn't want to panic, and I didn't want to make any, rash decisions. So I was like, okay, no, I'm not gonna let fear get the best of me. Just like point me in the right direction, and I kind of followed that internal navigation, and then that navigation is what led me, throughout the time there, because at some point I was completely lost, and it was like, well, I don't even know how to go back. That was within the first day, really. I said, I've been down all these different paths, and I don't really know I don't know if I could duplicate the route back,
Do you know approximately how far you had ventured from, I guess it would be hard to say because you're lost, but how far you were traveling from that initial point? Were you pretty far out, or hard to say within that 2 hours? You would think maybe 5K, a few miles.
Within the first few hours, just from my car to the tree, it was probably no more than 2 miles.
Got it.
That's what I would think.
Got it. And I have to ask this again. I know we covered this already at the press conference initially, but we talked about whether there was anything that you had ingested or done earlier in the day that could have altered your mindset. I did talk with your dad, I think it was the day after you were discovered, and he mentioned a mushroom tea. That was something that we were just discussing, but is there anything?
My dad mentioned a mushroom tea?
Yes, he did. I don't know.
I think he was.
I'm sorry.
No, he must have been talking about kombucha, but that's interesting. No, no, I didn't take anything at all. I was completely sober. My friends can all vouch for me, because that was a chapter of my life where I was like super into Kundalini yoga, which is like kind of like it's like yoga and praying combined, pretty much. It's like very spiritual, right? And so and then I was doing these like heavy cleanses with my partner Benjamin, and like we weren't drinking at all. We weren't like taking any substances. So it's I could totally see, I know a lot of people on Maui do that, right? And Haleakala, I don't know about the forest, but I know Haleakala like is a prime spot, and so on. But no, I did not do that. And I think that morning I don't even know if I had caffeine. I had some kind of herbal tea and like an RX bar, and that was it. And then I went out there, and in my pack I had water and like some granola bar or something like that. But no, absolutely not.
In the New York Times article, it talked a bit about how you survived out there. That's where the moths came from. And, it said that you had eaten some moths that had landed on your body, and there were, I think, strawberry guavas and other plants. Can you clarify maybe how you survived as far as sustenance goes.
Yeah. So within the first 4 days, I really didn't drink much water because I was just hell bent on finding my way back to my car, like charging through the jungle, and um, I learned to do that respectfully very quickly. But there were a few strawberry guava trees like along the way within those first 4 days. I would say that in the whole time that I was out there, I had less than 40 strawberry guavas. Um, and so that's 17 days plus about 40 miles, right, of hiking. So I don't even know what you'd call it. Not even hiking. It was like army marching because the ferns were like up to your eyeballs, right? So, and then as far as water, I was drinking water from the stream. I drank a little bit at the end of day 1 because I knew I was getting super dehydrated, and I was like, screw it. I know that there's lepto and all these different bugs that are in the water, but it's better than, dying of dehydration or something worse, or like passing out, So I drank water throughout my time there, and I did eat some other plants. I started getting adventurous, I'd say, with that on day like 6, because I noticed there wasn't really, it might have been later than that. There weren't really guavas around, like they were few and far between. I think the pigs had their way with them. And it was kind of getting to the end of that the strawberry guava season. So yeah, I started eating this other plant. I don't know what it's called. It looks like kind of celery that grows along the side of the waterfall. It was mostly fibrous, probably burned more calories to digest it than actually gave me, but I knew it had some kind of nutrients in it. And then I tried some other things. I just I would do what they call the sway test or the gut test. It's kind of a form of muscle testing to determine if something is like good for your body, right, as far as food. And that is something I've been using for a long time. So I'd do that, and then of course I'd chew it up, and if it started to sting the inside of my mouth, then I would spit it out. That's what they say to do. So yeah, and I ate some thimbleberries, which are like little red raspberries that are pretty tart. I probably had less than 20 of those.
No
And
moths.
the moths, I had 2 moths the very last day. So the very last day I was on day 17, I'm waiting for my helicopter pickup because I heard the day before, like, this is where the helicopter is going to pick you up. So I'm patiently waiting in this one spot, not consciously not moving, right? And I'm looking down at my body, and I like look like a skeleton. And I'd never been that skinny my whole life. Like I had a 6-pack, and it's like I had more bone in my arm than muscle. I could tell that I was withering away. And so I kind of said a prayer, and I was like, I need some protein, I need some sustenance, some real food. And like right then when I opened my eyes, a moth landed on my hand. And so I licked it off. It was so tiny. And then I think that happened again that day. But I was kind of scheming up a plan for catching some crawfish with making a net out of my shirt or something, because the crawfish in the stream, they don't have pinchers. So yeah, it was getting a little dicey there at the end as far as food supply.
You felt you had enough water, you could find ways to water sources and get enough.
Yeah, as of after I broke my knee, I was confined to that stream because I couldn't use the leg to walk at all. So I knew that if I wanted to survive, I had to stay close to water. So
was there a reason to keep, I know initially you were talking about moving and trying to find your way back to the car. Once you knew you were lost, what was the logic of staying in the same space versus continuing to venture on? Because you ended up pretty far in a harrowing space from where you started. So what was the logic to keep moving instead of staying put?
Within the first few days, or
just within the whole ordeal, just at some point saying, okay, I'm going to station here, and you ended up pretty far away from your...
Yeah. So when I stationed, it's because I broke my knee. because so within the first 4 days, it was like, I knew I couldn't make my way back the way I came. I was like, that's going to get me more lost. So I kept just following my intuitive direction. My intuitive direction was leading me further into this wilderness experience that was impromptu and I didn't call for by any means. But that's what happens. It's that same intuition that led me to that spot on the waterfall where they found me. I can't really explain that. I could just say that, I listened and that's what happened, right? And that I'm alive. It was almost impossible to turn around. So the few times I tried within the first day, of course I thought to myself, like, let me just stay in place. Like, let a ranger find me. Somebody's got to hike this path at some point, And then I saw myself like, okay, there's no water source. I'm out here alone. I have no idea where I am within the forest itself. I have no idea who's going to find me. Like, I'm not just going to sit here. Like I don't know what it was. You could call it pride. You can call it just that vigor to keep going and find your way, right? Feeling that the right direction. But yeah, that first day especially, the sitting in place was not a good option. Again, I was following my gut, and the gut was saying no. The gut was like, it was nauseous. It's kind of the same intense feeling you would get if you were to think about walking down a dark alley. It was that nauseous feeling, like, no, not a good idea. And so I followed the yeses, right? I followed those feelings of like, yeah, this is the way, this is what I should do, and so on. The few times I tried to turn around, the nauseous turned to like almost a stabbing pain in my stomach. And so that had me stopped in place. I sat there for a few minutes and was like, okay, like, where am I going to go? And I just kept, long story short, I just had to trust what I was guided as far as like the direction to go. So
you slept in a boar's den too?
Yeah, so a lot, because they've already created a bed. So it's just basically like somewhere where they've laid their body and created a flat spot, whether it's in cane grass or rocks or whatever. So most of the time they were boar's dens, and I would always like ask, like with respect, is this okay that I'm here? Will I be safe, sleeping here, or are they going to come around and like attack me, right?
Yeah, did they come back at any point, or were you okay?
No, I heard one boar the whole time I was out there. I saw one the first day that was a small one, and it ran away from me. And then I heard one at some point, and I just started screaming really loudly, kind of like rustling around the plants, because they don't want to fight. Animals are just like doing their own thing. The only time they would fight or attack would be if you're attacking their young, I think. So yeah.
And then your shoes, you lost your shoes do you want to talk about that too?
So there was a flash flood I think it was on Mother's Day. I'm pretty sure it was on Mother's Day. And that day I had put my shoes on top of really tall rocks that were probably like 3 feet out of the water, out of the stream bed. And the stream bed where I was it was the same stream bed where I broke my knee. Super calm, right? And then it started raining probably about 3 p.m. where I was, like pretty hard, and it did not let up. So by, let's say 7 or 8, let's say 7, yeah, it was like I was sitting in 1.5 feet of water, and the water was just surging. And so I looked over, and my knee's broken, so I'm not so inclined to like go out. I was already freezing. I wasn't so inclined to go out in the freezing rain and like get my shoes. And I wasn't planning at that point in hiking back in heavy brush because I couldn't walk. So I was like, I don't really care at this point. I would rather them stay there in the case that a helicopter is still circling, and that's a sign of life. So that's really why I left them out there, is so that they could see some sign of life, to know that a human was there. And then I also took the moss on the underside of the rocks, took a bunch of that stuff off, and then put it on top of 3 rocks, but spelled an SOS on top, like as big as I could. So Yeah, they got washed away because the water surged over the rocks at some point that night.
When they were found later, or one of them was found later by the helicopter pilot, Pete Voorhees, what do you make of that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't make anything of it because it was, I don't know where he found it, but I would assume that it got washed away and it went downstream. I
He,
don't, I don't, I don't think anything else besides that.
yeah, he said too, it could have been in the same clearly river system, and then it showed up and washed downstream as well. That was a question that I know was raised recently with when he disclosed that the shoe had been discovered. Another question that people have is, did you cross any roads or did you see any infrastructure when you're out there?
No. So the only time it was day one, I found myself going around, like finding my way, and then there was some kind of road. I guess it could line the perimeter of the park or something. And there was a mailbox there and a sign that said something about hunter check-in. And then there were some reservoirs and like water tanks over to the right. And then to the left was a road that said private property. And in my mind, it's like, okay, well, I don't want to go on private property. And I want to run into like a human so that they can help me get back to my car. So to the right, there was like nothing. It would have taken me like way, deeper into the forest. Going back, I was going to get more lost for sure. And then to the left, I was like, okay, this is my best option because there's probably some houses back here. Because the way that it looked in my mind was that there would be driveways coming off of the main road that leads you up to the forest parking lot, right? So some drives above the forest parking lot, but I wasn't sure because I hadn't been up there before. So I was just like guessing, like, oh, private property, probably driveways. Looks like there's cars down here every once in a while. So headed down that road until it ended.
Got it. There wasn't a thought of staying at the water infrastructure piece, or just in case someone saw you there or would go to maintain that piece of infrastructure and see you.
Yeah, I mean, there was a thought, and it was that gut feeling of, I mean, I sat there for probably like 10 minutes and assessed all my options, and I was like, no, like I started walking down, there's a path that kind of lines the forest along the left side of this water reservoir, like pond. So I started walking along the pond, and and something told me that was not the way. So then I was like, I walked back and I was like, okay, should I just sit here? That was the point in which I really said, should I just sit here and wait? And something in me was like, no, like it could be days. There's no water, right? I was like, it could be 4 days before anybody like sees me. And I'm just sitting in place. And I don't know about drinking that water out of the reservoir. Like, who knows? I could die alone from that. So for whatever reason, I didn't want to sit there. It was like, it didn't feel like the right thing. So I was like, no, I'm going to find my way out. I was like hell bent on it and headed down towards where I thought people would be, or towards, it would have been like the fourth arm of the square, which in my mind would have led me back to the road or the parking lot, one of those. I figured it would have spit me out somewhere along there.
The day you were discovered, I will probably remember for the rest of my life. I think a lot of people on Maui remember that moment because it was really emotional for people, especially those who've been searching. I can't imagine what that feeling was like. In the days that followed, in the interviews, there was some spiritual language that you use that may be confusing for people. Are you able to just share more about, when you reference a spiritual boot camp or an inner voice, or just so people can make sense? I think some were confused by the spiritual language in the interviews that led after.
Yeah. Yes. And I'll explain. And also, I, I was on, I was a spiritual person before I went into the woods, um, but nothing, but not really compared to what happened when I was out there. And then basically, you know, I surrendered my life to like the powers that be. Call it the universe, call it consciousness, call it God. I was like, I will surrender. I will do whatever as long as I can make it out of here alive. Right? That's like when the flash flood hit. And from that point on, I felt like, okay, there's a reason why I'm here. I'm going to find my way out. I have like this guidance that feels really good, and I would find it in my prayers. So I would like pray, because I was praying the whole time I was out there, to get home, to go home, to survive, for the helicopter to find me, anything you could think of, for food. Is this water okay to drink? I was praying all the time, and in that prayer, dialogue started. Okay, so it was almost like I was praying, I would ask for something, and I just received some kind of confirmation within me that felt like it was within my heart, that was like, okay, everything's going to be fine, right? So when I came out, and all that stuff paid off. So all that like positivity, all of the, not going into the negative places, not allowing fear to rule me, knowing this is all happening for some reason. And when I survived all of that and actually got rescued, I was a believer that what I experienced was true, right? And so I was just floating in that place, as they threw me into the spotlights in front of 20 news cameras 3 days out from my rescue. And so I apologize for the spiritual language. It was the place I was in at the time. And it's also, that's what kept me alive. That really is what kept me alive. It wasn't the sustenance. So I didn't think that anybody would have such a dilemma about that. But I understand, using different language, there's just like a misunderstanding, and people fear what they don't understand, right? So what I would say is, like, the spiritual boot camp was just something that, after I came out of the whole thing, I was like, man, that's what it felt like. It was like a boot camp. It tested my trust and faith on all levels, right? Every single like shred of doubt was tested until I just like fully surrendered, and I was like, okay, whatever this is, I believe in it, and I have a feeling it's going to keep me alive, and I'm just going to go with that. So I summed it up as spiritual boot camp. And then what was the other word that I used that was?
I think your inner voice and your intuition, it's just different language. I think you're already a spiritual person, as you have said, and friends and family have said. So people didn't know if that extra spiritual language was maybe related to trauma, or if that's, you're standing by all those initial statements on, leading with that inner voice, and it being a boot camp. There was a lot of spiritual language, so I can't imagine going through that. I don't know how you decipher those things now.
Yeah, so the underlying message of what, was behind the language is the truth, right? So, and I was in a place where I couldn't really, I couldn't use, I could have, but it felt more authentic to use the language that just flowed through me. So I used that language, right? That's the way I was like speaking when I was out there, and that's what got me through. So, but now, I'm in a place where I understand that was a major ordeal, and I'm in a place where I can use more grounded language to relate the same message. But yeah, the inner voice, I mean, really what that is it's gut intuition, or it's listening to your heart, or, wisdom, right? And Hawaiian is like mana'o, right? And so whatever that is that we all have within us, I was listening to that. So
nice. Also, too, there was a lot of discussion over, your search and rescue amassed more people than we've seen in recent history as far as volunteers. Sometimes it was about 100 a day, I think, volunteering to look for you. Was there any frustration after the fact about police, fire, first responder efforts in contrast with community efforts?
No, as far as you're talking about the fire and rescue.
Yeah, if there was any frustration from you or family members or
No,
others about
there
the
really there
fire.
really is not frustration in that respect. I mean, they were called and they did their job, you know, and um, thinking back, it's like there were helicopters looking for me the whole time, and none of them saw me until that last day, you know. So I felt like I wasn't seen by any of the helicopters until the last day. So I'm not going to say that they didn't do their job. I think they probably did do their job, you know, to the best of their abilities. But like I was way the heck out there. And I don't think anybody was expecting that, you know, not even up till the last day. They found me because they had done all that groundwork and covered that whole area, and then they knew like they had to expand the search outwards. So that's when they actually found me. So no, I think that everybody played their part beautifully in how the whole search went, because had they not, then like I could have still been out there 4 days later, and who knows what would have happened, right?
And can you talk briefly? I know that you mentioned I can look on Facebook to find out or to find a post that your parents had addressed the money situation, but because the GoFundMe was rather substantial, I think it was over 70,000. Can you just address where that money went? And some people have different questions about how that was spent. But if you were to give a brief summary, how was that funding used? And who started
Yeah.
there were also questions about who started the GoFundMe.
Um, I didn't even get into the money aspect. Like I didn't see like a cent of that money. I mean, obviously that money helped to rescue me with the helicopters, and it also, so the money went towards the helicopters because that was very expensive. Um, I don't remember how expensive, but it was very expensive. And the some of the searchers were paid too, especially like the high profile searchers that could rappel and go into like off grid areas where not a whole, they wouldn't send like just a random volunteer to. So those people were paid the amount that they were missing out on work. So they were paid that same amount of like what their work would pay them for that day. That was my understanding. Like Javi and Elena and Chris and Troy, right? So some of the main people, but I don't know who got paid and who didn't. I know that a lot of people volunteered. I think that some of the money went towards like the setup, as far as like the the TVs and the mapping stuff and the technology, the tent. Most people donated food, so I don't even think they spent money on food. Um, some people I knew, like they brought in like the search dogs from like the canine unit from Kauai, and maybe even Oahu, I think. Um, I mean, it's funny, like you're kind of asking the wrong person because I wasn't in charge of that, but I'm doing my best. And
No, and I can always follow up. Was that something that your parents had access to, or the searchers had access
yeah,
to the funding?
so my dad was the main person
Got it.
as far as like, I don't know who started it. I don't think, I, I feel like it could have been Sarah or it could have been Sarah that started it. But they started it and tried to gain funding for the helicopters because they knew theirs were going to be like super expensive. Um, yeah, those are all the things I know about as far as the money. I mean, the money, it was like specifically written in the contract of the money that it was going to be used for the rescue efforts only, and that everything was documented, right? And then they sent out a message to all the people that donated the GoFundMe to make sure that it was clear where the money went. I mean, it didn't cover my hospital bills or anything. All that stuff was out of pocket for me. Yeah, it didn't. I didn't see a cent of that. So.
And thank you for clarifying that. And I can always follow up later too. And I see that your parents were probably more involved in that aspect. And I'm nearing the end, so don't worry, I won't keep you much longer. But in retrospect, with all of this is a huge ordeal. You came out alive. I can't imagine, again, that type of experience. Is there anything in retrospect that you would have done differently?
Well, I mean, I didn't want to get lost. I definitely didn't aim to get lost that day. Um, I didn't take anything that would have contributed to me getting lost. So, I don't, it's really a hard question to ask because this happened and I can't change it. And my life has taken this like ridiculous turn, right? That being said, my life was fantastic before this ever happened, right? And so, yeah, I would have loved to just like continue on with that life and like had this not happen. If I still like went into the forest, hindsight tells me, okay, maybe I would have, that's just a hard question because I did what I felt was right at every single moment, and that's how it played out, you know? So it's kind of like, I guess the only alternative would have been to not listen to that inner voice, that, not listen to those strong sensations and just ignored any kind of inkling that I should go this way and just turn around and go back the way I came and keep trying, in that same space if I were to find myself back there. But I think that the reality is that I was lost within the first 3 hours, right? And I don't know what would have happened if I tried a different route. I felt like it would have created more of a situation of me getting more lost. So it played out the way it was. And of course, I would have just rather that not happened at all.
For people who do hike or go off alone and unplug, that made a lot of sense what you were saying, that you like to leave technology behind. Would you give them advice to maybe take a phone or let
Yeah.
someone know, or, practically speaking, would you let hikers know to stay in the same spot, or is there any practical type of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't been hiking alone since, and I'm a little traumatized. But, you know, hindsight, I would definitely not, I would always bring water. And this is what I did prior to that one hike. Every time I'd gone out in Maui, Haleakala, the Makawao Forest, I rarely go alone anyway. And unless it's for short little hikes where I know the way pretty well, but even Iao, right, for little hikes in Iao. And I would always bring a backpack with water and sunscreen and obviously my key and some kind of like cover up shirt for sun protection and like some snack, So I'd always have that stuff. I would say advice for anybody going hiking by themselves that likes to do that is you can put your phone on airplane mode if you really want to disconnect, right? And then, no, but then the thing that they found for the people that were searching for me is they used the GPS app, right? I think it's called, yeah, I think it's called something like that, the GPS app that helped them to mark where they had been and to find their way back. And then they shared that trail information so that they were like marking off space that they knew they had covered. So that app is phenomenal because a lot of people just looking for me got lost and they had to really use that app to find their way back because it all looks the same out there. So if nothing else, if you don't bring anything else, definitely bring your phone with use of the app. That's what I would recommend.
Nice. I know too, separately, would you consider moving back? I know people do miss your practice, your physical therapy here. Is that in consideration for you to come back to Maui?
Yeah, so it absolutely is. I'm looking to finish this book to share the story with whoever cares, and then get on with my life. So the book is helping me. The writing of the book is helping me to fully process it. So then I'm like not living in this trauma anymore. And I can return to some sense of normalcy. So, yeah, I would love to move back to Maui. Right now, it doesn't feel right, being with the current circumstances. But definitely like maybe down the road. So I miss all my people and I miss the island.
Tell me about the book too. That's sounds like a big project. Do you have a publisher? When is your estimated date of it being completed, and what will it be about? I can make a guess, but
Yeah, so it's just going to be about my individual experience of like what I went through, you know, and the things that basically kept me alive, right? So all of the tools, and it's more like the inward tools, the mental tools, the emotional tools, even the physical, like know-how of like, I know I can eat that, but I can't eat that, right? So just a combination of all the stuff that kept me alive, and I would say in a really good space mentally throughout the whole thing to be able to like get to day 17 and then to be rescued and to be in like fairly good shape, right? Miraculously. Um, and yet, actually, the stream water, it was like, it was amazing that I didn't get anything from the stream water. All I can say with that is that I I asked for blessings on the water every single time, you know, and that a lot of people were praying for me, and so that's what I have to account it to. But yeah, so the book is going to be a lot about what kept me alive and what kept me positive when it seemed like everything was against me, right? All odds were against me, and that like so many times I just wanted to give up and throw in the towel and be like, this isn't worth it. I'm just done with life, you know? And I didn't let that get the best of me. So yeah, I'm aiming for September, and but we'll see how it plays out. I don't like a whole lot of pressure because it's an emotional like processing. There's an emotional processing aspect to it, so I'm not looking for like pressure of a publisher or PR or anything like that. So whenever it comes out, then I'll share it, and we'll look for all that stuff to make it happen as far as like publishing.
no publisher yet.
No.
Got it. Any movie ideas in the works or anything like
Not
that?
at all.
Got it. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add that I may have missed, and been really great talking with you.
Yeah, you too. And yeah, I think that I'm just happy that I got to talk directly to you and got to share, you know, my truth of the story. And just that, you know, it's I'm not a celebrity. I am I'm a human that came from the East Coast, ended myself on Maui, and then was like basically like tucked away in little haiku until this whole thing just like, you know, blew up my spot and plastered my face over, you know, every news outlet in the world. So yeah, I guess I just like to share that, you know, I'm just a human just like anybody else, and that um, the only difference is that I went through this traumatic experience and I found some tools to help me through, right? So there's no like hierarchy here. It's just more of like, maybe I can help some people through like relating, you know?
Can I ask how Benjamin's doing? That was just something in the back of my head that I know we've all been connected to this story, how he is. And is he
Yeah, he's good. I hear from his friends that he's good, but when everything hit, like we both had traumatic PTSD. And so we both had to like go get our own help because it was like significant, right? And so um, we ended things on the terms of like, okay, when we get ourselves back together, like we'll see if it feels right kind of thing. And so he went his separate way and I went mine. And I think I don't know where he is actually. I think he's in the middle United States with his family maybe, but I hear he's well and he's happy. And so I'm stoked for him. Yeah. And
okay?
grateful that he was there like the whole time.
We were able to connect with Javier and Chris, and everyone seems to be doing well. He was the last person, Benjamin, that we didn't know how he's doing. So thank you for that update. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your truth directly with us, and getting that community connection in this time is huge, speaking directly to you. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you.